Oklahoma City is considered to be one of the best cities in the country for a number of reasons, and it's a city attracting more and more people every year. Besides the population, several types of crimes are also on the rise. So far this year, OKC has reported 33 murders, an average of 3 a month. There's good news here. That figure is slightly down from last year. The number of rapes in the city stands at 157, which is also a decrease. But there were more than 1,200 people assaulted so far this year in Oklahoma City, an increase of 18%. One of the more common teenage crimes, larceny, is up 15%, with more than 8,000 reported from around town. There is some bad news for car owners. Oklahoma City is approaching the 2,000 mark in auto thefts. Police say that's a 9% increase from the same time last year. And finally, arson made a big gain in the past 10 months and shows no signs of slowing down. Firefighters are battling about 14% more fires intentionally set. And just why does the crime rate continue to rise so fast in big cities? Well, one common reason given is because the economic conditions are so poor. That may be true in other cities, but not necessarily in Oklahoma. Is there a simple solution to bring the crime rate down? Well, law enforcement officials don't think so. But they do think if people work together, at least maybe the crime rate won't raise as fast as it has been. Ed Stewart, Action 4, Oklahoma City.
To simply own an AWACS plane like this one would do the Saudis little good if they didn't know how to use it. To solve that problem, the Defense Department has announced plans to train 2 crews from the Royal Saudi Air Force at Tinker Field. About 30 airmen will begin training at Tinker in 1984, roughly 1 year before the first AWACS plane is delivered to Saudi Arabia in late 1985. Instructors from Tinker, IBM, Westinghouse, and Boeing will teach the Saudis how to use surveillance scopes, radar, and computers on the planes. When those 2 crews are trained, they'll return to their country and help teach 6 other crews how to operate the equipment. The Air Force says the preliminary training plans could change if any snags develop in the AWACS sale. Otherwise, 30 Saudi airmen are scheduled to take up residence here in Oklahoma in about 3 years. Larry Otis, Action 4, Tinker Field.
For the past 3 years, the old Rock Island line has been dormant. It looks like a graveyard for trains. But it appears that all this is going to change, at least for a 62-mile stretch of the line from Hydro to Elk City. The state of Oklahoma has agreed to purchase that stretch for $3.1 million.
The next legal hurdle that has to be consummated is final approval of the sale by the bankruptcy court. We expect that to occur reasonably quickly, and we see no real problems with that.
Planning engineer Jerry Chambers of the Transportation Department says rail operations could begin as early as November 16th. Chambers adds that with all the oil and gas production combined with agribusiness in that part of the state, rail service is an absolute requirement.
We look for the rail operation to be very beneficial to the shippers along the line, to the state of Oklahoma in terms of economics, to this region in terms of energy availability, and to the nation as a whole.
The state will lease the 62-mile stretch of track to a company from New Jersey. The state will get a percentage of the revenue. Chambers does not feel a suit filed by the Rock Island Users Association will affect this sale. The association wants to force Rock Island trustee William Gibbons to justify his rejection of a $45 million purchase offer for the main north-south line through Oklahoma. Ben McCain, Action 4.
we see increasing costs of food, I'd like to let it be known that the farmer's not getting his share. And somewhere down the road, we're going to have to, farmers and ranchers are going to have an increase in the for prices we receive for our farm products if we're to stay in business.
What do you feel is causing the rise in retail food prices, and on the other hand, farm income is decreasing?
It's just a sign of the time of inflation. If we could control our interest rates, the inflation rate would follow the decline of the interest rate, and if we could eliminate inflation, I think a lot of the problems we're having, not only in agriculture, but as well as the whole nation, they could be solved with a decrease in interest rates.
We don't normally see Roy Clark in this kind of setting. You'll usually find the entertainer in concert, on a network TV show, or working on a movie. But Roy Clark is like many Oklahomans. He loves horses.
I think it's the personality of horses. It's the contact you have with them, and you never know how a horse is going to work out. And that's the challenge. If you get like a world champion now, well, what will I have 2 years from now? You're always trying to get that horse at least, or better than that horse. And you're never satisfied, but you're pleased.
This horse, known as Australia Kid, won the world championship in junior trail. Clark, to say the least, was excited.
In fact, he tied, and they had to have a work-off, you know. And I said, why are they doing this to me? I'm already a basket case, you know, but it's something, just to be part of a horse like that.
Clark says he doesn't get to spend as much time as he'd like to with his horses. The entertainer, who makes his home in Tulsa, spends the majority of his time on the road. Ben McCain, Action 4 at the State Fairgrounds.
Paint vat caught on fire back there. It a spark from a grind that we got back there. The spark hit in the paint vat and it ignited off, went off.
Federal District Court Judge Luther Eubanks accepted all 5 guilty pleas at once. Each former commissioner was then photographed and fingerprinted by the U.S. Marshal's Office. Jack Davis was the only commissioner who had anything to say to reporters.
I'm just sorry it happened, and I wish it was over. And that's all I got to say.
The other former officials tried to slip quietly out a rear door of the courthouse. When we caught up with Teddy Lee Dean, apparently he felt the photograph taken by the U.S. Marshal was the only one he wanted taken today.
Don't bother him, and don't you bother him either.
Former State Representative Don Feddersen was among the former commissioners who pled guilty today. All 5 former officials were released on $5,000 personal recognizance bonds. Judge Eubanks will sentence the former commissioners within the next 9 months. Each man could receive up to 5 years in jail and a $10,000 fine. Scott Wallace, Action 4 at the federal courthouse.
Action 4 has had several anonymous phone calls this week from people who say they're instructors at the Air Traffic Control Academy. They seem to be worried that the new students are not getting the quality of teaching that they were getting before the PATCO strike. In addition, these people have said that their workload as instructors has increased greatly. It's beginning to take a severe toll on their health. For the most part, they say they don't agree with the Reagan administration's projection that air traffic will be back to normal in a little over 2 years. Action 4 was told by an instructor of the Academy that Monday's graduating class of air traffic control students had a 66% failure rate, but the FAA denies that.
Well, we had 72 in the class in that particular option. And we had a failure of 36 people, which averages obviously 50% of the 72 people did not make it. The average we've talked about in the past has been about 25%.
We tried to talk to several students and instructors on what the classroom situation is really like, but most declined to comment on camera, perhaps because they're afraid of retribution by the FAA. Locally, the Air Traffic Control Academy presents a rosy picture that things will be back to normal in about 2 years. However, a federal investigating committee spent last week looking into the whole process on student training, and today a spokesman on that committee said that it does not look optimistic that a 2-year projection date can be met. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
How are things going for you?
Late Wednesday evening, authorities were called to the shooting of Highway Patrol Trooper Sammy Williamson. Williamson had stopped a car about 2 miles east of Okemah on I-40. During the check, the driver of the car apparently shot Williamson at close range, wounding him seriously. 3 other people along with the driver have now been arrested and charged in connection with the shooting. Meanwhile, authorities in California think the 4 suspects may be involved in other murders in their state.
Early this morning, we served the county sheriff in that local county with a felony warrant charging 1 count of murder, 1 count of attempt murder, 2 counts of robbery, and 1 count of grand theft.
We have a double homicide, 2 young males, and we believe at this point that the 2 males and the females are probably all principals. The vehicle in which the 4 people were, or 3 of the 4 were taken into custody and belongs to one of our victims. And we believe at this point that one of the weapons that was taken into custody is our weapon that was used in our homicide.
Authorities are undecided at this time which state will begin prosecution of the suspects first. Carol Lambert, Action 4. Drivers on I-35 have had to face the inconveniences of construction for about 2.5 years now. The improvements have been made section by section to coincide with fundings from Congress. The latest section, between Frontier City and 63rd Street, will be completed this December. Normally, another section would then be started, but maybe not in this case. The money needed for the new contracts, $23 million, has not been received.
The problem in Congress seems to be that that the House is trying to pass a one-year highway bill, and the Senate is trying to pass a 5-year highway bill. And tied up in this controversy is the interstate cost estimate, and until this interstate cost estimate is approved by Congress, we simply won't have any interstate funds for contract letting. We have used up all of our interstate money.
If Congress doesn't resolve the dispute, work on I-35 will come to a halt, and drivers will have to settle for a partially finished interstate.
Oklahoma's Department of Transportation is anxious to finish its interstate, but their hands are tied until Congress makes a decision. Sherry Sellers, Action 4.
Rape crisis centers across the country want to increase the awareness that all women are vulnerable to rape or assault. Records show that females from infants to senior citizens have become victims. But if a woman knows what she's dealing with, she may have an advantage. There are 3 types of rapists. The first and most common, the power rapist.
He's not interested in necessarily beating her, although if he has to beat her to commit his crime, he will. He's wanting to experience the power that he has, or that he thinks he doesn't have in his normal day life. And only in a rape situation does he think that he can experience that kind of power. To force a woman into doing something that's obviously she does not want to do.
The second kind of rapist is the anger rapist. He doesn't rape as often as the power rapist, nor does he plan his attack.
He will talk about the rape as feeling better. He's not talking about the sexual intercourse. He feels like he is ventilated. He's gotten rid of some of that anger. And if you talk to the victim of an anger rapist, he definitely has gotten rid of that anger. She will be the one who's been beaten.
The third type is sadistic. He is the most dangerous, but fortunately there are fewer of them.
The sadistic rapist often has fantasies of bondage, and he will read magazines about bondage. Maybe even start as a youngster collecting from detective magazines and things like that, collecting pictures of women tied up.
Across the country, members of rape crisis centers are working closely with law enforcement agencies and hospitals for the physical and mental well-being for the victim. These efforts are not only increasing the public awareness of the problem of rape, but are also bringing about law reform. Rape crisis centers everywhere offer 24-hour confidential assistance for victims.
We have go for main engine start. We have main engine start. Minus 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. We have ignition of the solid rocket boosters and liftoff. Liftoff of America's Space Shuttle, and the Space Shuttle has cleared the tower.
Houston now controlling. Mission control confirms roll maneuver started. 20 seconds, thrust looks good. 25 seconds, roll maneuver completed.
Well, turn on him, Pet Samson. Give him a kiss.
Both of these dogs are police dogs, trained to fight crime in our city. At home, they're as lovable as any household pet, but on duty, they have a job and know how to do it.
It comes from training and from the officer knowing how to handle his dog and what to do. If they start to flee, the dog will catch them. Now, they're trained to catch and hold, which means they're going to bite them, and they're going to bite hard.
Sergeant Schobert says German Shepherds are used exclusively in the K-9 unit because they're versatile, intelligent, and strong. Most are donated from citizens who no longer want the dogs. He says the best time to start training the dogs is when they're 18 months old, and that many of the K-9s work until they're around 10. The K-9 unit in Oklahoma City currently has 11 dogs on the force, but training schools for new dogs are held throughout the year. This week, in the crisp early morning setting of Lake Draper, classes in field obedience and tracking techniques are being held.
Turn, move,
Military formations are practiced to get the dogs used to working with each other as well as in crowd control situations. When tracking a suspect, the dogs pick up the scent and go downwind, flushing him into the open.
Hold him, dog! Hold him! Hold him!
Field instructor Kenneth Kidd says the 2-month basic training is only the beginning in getting the dogs ready for on-the-street use.
At the end of the 8 weeks, they will protect themselves, they will protect the handler, and they will obey the handler's commands. There's a lot of our training that's done on the streets in actual situations, but they will be trained to the point to where they will obey the handler.
162 is on traffic in the 1100 block of Northeast 23rd.
In Part 2, we'll show you how these canines earn their keep. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
Question about use of petroleum products in agriculture. It addresses the problem of the forests of the world. It's a treaty to control saying we don't like doling out these free that the Russians move out of Iran in 1940. An hour and a half of prime teaching time in this country was spent by children in the 2nd and 3rd grade screaming slogans. Death to America, death to Qatar, death to Saddam Hussein, death to anyone who got in the way or suggested that the Ayatollah was on the wrong track. Steady, infused, unending injections of hatred. Those children will grow up with that. They will represent their nation in the United Nations. They will join that large group of people who far, far outnumber the United States at this point. And they will bring attitudes to the United Nations. And our children need to be prepared to come to that.
You might say Ren Sims is a lucky boy. In the past 2 weeks, he's ridden in a limousine, appeared on network TV, and sat in Governor Nye's chair. Today, he was proclaimed governor of Oklahoma by Governor Nye. But the one thing Ren would most like to do, he can't. He'd like to see his 62-year-old foster grandfather, who remains in Baptist Burn Center.
I think I can make him, be a little bit happier.
Do you think it'd make yourself happier too?
Yeah.
While I can certainly be sympathetic with the boy's desire to see his adopted grandfather, there are several reasons why we can't allow this and why we have a cutoff of visiting age in the burn center at age 16. We try desperately to limit visitors to these patients because they bring bacteria and viruses in from outside which can contaminate the burn wound and make the patient even sicker than he is and maybe even kill him.
Wren's mother went to visit the grandfather while Wren flew with Governor Nye to the dedication of a new helipad at Children's Hospital. Doctors at Baptist say they hope their new patient will be well enough in a couple of weeks to visit with Wren. They say they'll be happy to set up a special visiting area at that time so that Wren can visit his foster grandfather without the risk of infecting him or other Baptist burn patients. Scott Wallace, Action 4.
It's an emotional issue. The school board has proposed taking Carver's 60 handicapped students and dividing them into 3 regular schools. Many Carver students have already been that route, and their parents say it didn't work. Carver is a public school, but only for the handicapped. And children who haven't made it in other schools have at Carver.
If a handicapped child is able to be in the mainstream of the schools, that's wonderful, that's fantastic. But if they are not, then we need to provide an educational setting for those children. And this is what we have at Carver Center. It has been in existence for 16 years, and it is truly a work of the Lord, and it is truly love that keeps these children there.
In the last 6 years, our daughter has attended 10 different schools. She's failed in every one but Carver.
One of the purposes of the meeting tonight was to get public input on the overall plan. The board got plenty of input, but just about all of it from Carver parents who do not want the school closed down. The board will make its final decision November 30th.
The issue is, where will the handicapped children get a better education? At the Carver school or in a regular public school? Carver parents feel that their children may be ridiculed in a regular school and withdraw even further. They think that their children will get the education and the special attention that they need at the Carver School. Ted Brown, Action 4 at the school board.
Students at the University of Oklahoma are concerned about a proposed 30% increase in tuition costs. This would mean at least $5 more for every credit hour a student takes. The goal from the Board of Regents is to have students pay 25% of the cost for their higher education. Today, student representatives told a Senate Committee on Education the increase is too much, and they think it will drive many students away.
That by increasing the tuition to a 25% of the cost of education, this year and in years to come, we'll be pricing out a significant portion of the college students in state.
Students say the Board of Regents seem to be forgetting that other things like housing and books are also going up in price all the time. There will be a public hearing on the proposal before a final decision is made. Ed Stewart, Action 4 at the State Capitol.
Oklahoma City firemen were called to the Jim Nix residence about 2 o'clock this morning. Shivering in the cold, Sandy Nix says she was in a state of shock when she awoke to flames.
Well, I heard this roar and I just looked up and I seen that fire with my little girl was laying in it.
Where did it happen?
In me and my little girl's bedroom.
Were you sleeping?
Uh-huh.
What about, how do you think it started?
In my electric blanket.
Did you have it on high or anything?
I had it on about 4.
You think it was short in the electric blanket, or?
The fireman said that it was the electric blanket had shorted out.
Fast thinking from Sandy saved her little girl from being injured, and quick response from the fire department saved the home from extensive fire damage. Most of the structural damage was confined to the bedroom, but heavy smoke damage was spread throughout the house. The Nixes can't believe the night's events. After all, the electric blanket was only 3 days old. Carol Lambert, Action 4.
There was a bag of money recovered at the scene where the robber switched from the getaway car to the switch car or cars. The bag contained an undisclosed amount of money. I'm unable to disclose the amount, just as I'm unable to disclose the amount of money taken in the robbery.